This episode of Bend the Knee is brought to you by Lady Kelsey of Lethbridge, whose words are, "A drop of golden sun." If you'd like to hear your name at the start of the show and receive exclusive Westeros content, hit us up at patreon.com/Bend the Knee.
Hello and welcome to Bend the Knee, a Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt, the Bud Knight.
And I am Sir Ezra, the Watchful. Welcome to our Song of Ice and Fire book club. We are covering Chapter 9, Tyrion, today. And we also have a little Doom of Valyria to get into. So this will be actually a shorter episode. Both of these chapters are extremely short. But then next week's, we're contemplating doing 2 episodes because it's so long.
Especially the World of Ice and Fire part is huge. So
real quick notes here. If you'd like to call in to the show, our number is 614-547-2350. Send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com. And with that, we jump into our first segment, The Small Council.
Yeah.
This is where we kind of go over just some updates on life, updates on the book, the series, the show. What do you got for us today, Matt?
Well, announced this week, obviously, we saw the cover art of Fire and Blood. Yeah. So there was, a while back, there was the German art shown, and it was said it was going to release sometime in November, and everybody kind of thought that it was going to be, probably a worldwide release, and that is certainly the case. So taken from Gur's Not a Blog, No, winter is not coming, not in 2018 at least.
Wow.
You're going to have to keep waiting for the winds of winter. It's just like the show, winter takes, a couple of years to get to us. You will, however, be able to return to Westeros this year, as I suggested back over on LiveJournal. So he just moved his Not a Blog. That's what he's referring to there. Archmaester Galden.
Yeah, Glidane? I don't know.
Glidane has at last completed and delivered the first half of his monumental history of the Targaryen kings of Westeros, Fire and Blood, and Bantam, Spectra, and HarperCollins Voyager will be releasing the hardcover on November 20th. I am thrilled to say. I've seen the Archmaester's manuscript since it is handwritten on vellum. With a quill pen, he required my help in transcribing the text to a more modern format.
Wow.
Yeah, WordStar 4.0 on a DOS computer. That is something interesting, is that Gur says he writes everything on an old computer that can't even connect to the internet.
That's awesome.
Took a while, but a few weeks ago I was able to ship it off to my editors on both sides of the Atlantic and to my foreign representatives for all the publishers around the world. Some of my foreign publishers will be releasing their editions simultaneously with the US and UK hardbacks. Others may need to wait for a translation from the common tongue. It's a hefty book, almost 1,000 manuscript pages. Okay, 989 if you want to be precise. That's not quite as long as A Game of Thrones or any of the later volumes in A Song of Ice and Fire, but there's a lot of reading there, and I hope you'll enjoy it. This first volume covers the Targaryen kings from Aegon I, that's Aegon the Conqueror, to the regency of Aegon III, the Dragonbane, along with their wives, wars, siblings, children, friends, rivals, laws, travels, and sundry other matters. For those of you not up on your Westeros history, that's Aegon I, Aenys, Maegor the Cruel, Jaehaerys I, Viserys I, Aegon II, and Aegon III. Oh, and there are dragons too. Lots of dragons. Of course, the story doesn't end with the regents of Aegon III. There's a lot more history to come, and Archmaester Galden will get to all of that too in Fire and Blood Volume 2, but that's a few years down the pike, so don't get impatient. Galden will get it to us eventually, but he's old, and so am I, which of course makes us nervous. And we both have other projects to tend to as well. The Citadel puts a lot of demand on an Archmaester's time. Oh, and I almost forgot the best part. Fire and Blood will be illustrated throughout. It won't be a huge coffee book table with art on every page like A World of Ice and Fire, but there will be lots of interior artwork. Think more along the lines of the special anniversary edition of A Game of Thrones we did a few years ago, or the gorgeous hardcover of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, the Duncan Egg Collection. We'll have more than 75 black and white illustrations done by artist Doug Wheatley. And here's then he shows us a peek of the cover, which we posted on our Facebook page. Interesting that cover, that it definitely looks like, when we look at the Targaryen sigil today, this definitely looks like a more, I guess, want to use primitive, like war banner, which is cool.
Yep.
So it's just a white burning flag with 3 red dragon heads.
Yeah, it looks epic, and the flag is on fire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so some conflicts. He said there would be wars, and what have you. What's that next black and white? We have a black and white image. We don't really know. It is just a dragon, and it does appear as if someone is riding it. You can kind of see there. It's kind of hard because it's small. There's definitely someone riding on it, and it looks as if they are destroying some cities. But if you look at the architecture in this picture, it looks more like Essos to me than it does Westeros. So that's my guess, that this picture is maybe, the ending of Essos, as they. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that today a little bit.
Yeah, but I was wondering if that's one of these black and white drawings that's going to be in the book.
Oh, I would imagine so.
Yeah. That's pretty cool, because it's a pretty detailed drawing.
Oh, it's definitely detailed. And so that's probably the kind of artwork, if you've looked at the special edition Game of Thrones version that has some artwork in it, that's what he says it's going to be like. Anyway, so longtime fans and readers of my Not-A-Blog will know the entire history of A Fire and Blood, but there's some of you who do not. This is the book that I used to jokingly refer to as the Gurmillion, which is a Lord of the Rings reference to the Silmarillion. That is to say, my version of Tolkien's mammoth history of Middle-earth. In my case, the focus is on Targaryens from Aegon's conquest to Robert's rebellion. These histories began a few years back as a series of sidebars intended for the World of Ice and Fire, our huge illustrated coordinates, but I got carried away, as I tend to do, and before the long sidebars got so long they were threatening to overwhelm the entire book, so we pulled them out of that volume and saved it for this one. And then this book is apparently so big that he had to pull it back, which seems to be a George R.R. Martin kind of a thing, because that's kind of what a Dance with Dragons is. It was a Dance with Dragons and A Feast for Crows were supposed to be one book, which is why it's kind of, the timing in that is kind of weird.
Yep.
So then he just goes on to talk a little bit more about it, and he says this is not a traditional narrative, and it was never intended to be. Some of my fans have objected to the term fake history, which he uses that term quite a bit when he's talking about these history volumes as opposed to just the novel. And he goes on there. So it's not a novel; it's more of kind of a history, I guess, book.
Yeah, but this is interesting. I didn't know he was doing this. So he was legitimately releasing a lot of this on that forum. And because he just mentions here later on, and I don't know if you might be getting to this, but The Sons of the Dragon is a book that I read, which is basically he was a bunch of authors got together, and it was a book of swords, and they were talking about Blackfire, and it's basically Aegon's sons, in a sense. And what he's saying here is that was what you get in that book is what people had already seen and was already on his Not-A-Blog, which is crazy cool. So man, it's important to pay attention to that blog.
It is. That blog's been going for a very, very long time. Yeah. So sifting through it. So maybe that's another reason why he moved it.
Yeah.
The book I bought, The Ice Dragon, which publishers say, like on the, because it's published by so many, different publishers, I guess, or whatever. I bought it because I'd read, online about it. Oh, hey, he published this book, and it takes place during the events, in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. But Gur on his blog says, nope. Don't trust those publishers. I wrote this he wrote this in like the 1980s. He's like, wrote this way before
Yeah.
Game of Thrones. So I just kind of chalk it up as old Nan's tale. But
an old Nan's tale. That's
an old
a good
Nan's
one.
tale. But so that's why his blog is super important. So anyway, he just goes on to kind of say it's not a novel, but then he says the important thing is November 20th. Mark it down in your calendars.
Okay. We will do that.
Oh, we will be doing that.
That is huge. Let me go back up here to some of the stuff that you had listed out, because I wasn't sure how far it would go, but it's going to get to Aegon the Third, right? So I'm trying to think of a cliffhanger that it might leave us on, but that is huge.
Right.
It'll have the Sons of the Dragon piece in there, and probably more of the battles and stuff that took place and the passing down of Blackfyre and all of that. Goodness or whatever.
Yeah, so that's a right about where you and I thought it would, because we were talking throughout the week, and Sir Ezra and I were saying that we were thinking about where it was going to be because it was in 2 volumes, and we were both kind of saying it's probably going to Blackfyre Rebellion is about where it's going to split.
Yeah,
and so that's it. So if it ends with Aegon the Third, then say that's a good place for it to end. So then you start with Aegon. I guess maybe you start with it ends with him being born. You start with him. And then you have his kids. You get to Aegon the Fourth, and that's where the Blackfyre Rebellion starts. And maybe that's another reason why he wants to push that part of it towards the end. So that way maybe he can get Winds of Winter done. We know he's also doing. There's supposed to be more Dunk and Egg stuff coming, and so maybe that's another reason is he was like, I want to get another Dunk and Egg done before. That comes out. And
I think he writes those a little, like, I mean, I know he still takes his time on those and they're integrated or whatever, but yeah, he would want to get, I almost think he would want to get Fire and Blood done before he gets to the Dunk and Egg stuff.
Yeah.
Well, at least he has to have an outline as to where he's going to go with it. But yeah, this is really, really interesting because you have like a big Aegon's conquest battle situation to start this one, and then you would have the Blackfyre Rebellion to start the next one. There's a bunch of Dance of Dragons and stuff. It would be in the volume 1 as well too.
So here's a question for you. And actually, someone had kind of mentioned this a little bit on our Instagram. Someone had asked us what we thought. So I'll just kind of read it now. So Matty V, he's hit us up a couple times. I said, we put it on our follow-up Friday. He'd asked us some questions and we responded to it. And so this one, he said, so glad to see the announcement of Fire and Blood. They say it's not a novel. So he said, my question for you guys is, and it kind of goes into this, is like, what do you think the TV series is going to be? Because he says it's one of the spinoffs because it's not going to be Robert's Rebellion. He also said it's not going to be Dunk and Egg. So I'm starting to think it might be Aegon's Conquest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I thought more about that when you shared that question that Matty V had sent us, and I thought more about this. Where would you start? Because you want to start somewhere in which you could carry on and move forward.
Right.
So if it starts at Aegon's Conquest, you have everything in front of that you could get to. And really, what's the point of going too much? Like there's really no attachment, I guess, for us. I mean, your Deep and Sweaty fans it'd be cool to see something with Nymeria and some stuff like that that's before this. But really, is there much that we would want to see before Aegon's Conquest?
Yeah, and as we've been kind of discussing that we think the books might be totally different than the show, but the show is at least leading us down the direction, obviously, that R plus L equals J and that Jon is also a Targaryen. So the Targaryen house actually is one we don't really get a lot of in the show outside of Daenerys. Yeah. And then just stories about people talking about how terrible the Mad King was.
Right. Yep.
And stuff like that. So you're going to end it with Jon being a Targaryen. Well, then that's going to be the house that everyone kind of thinks is really cool. Because right now it's the Starks because they are mostly presented as the main characters in the show. So if you're going to do a spinoff, do it about why this House Targaryen is such an important house.
Right.
So I'm starting to think Aegon's Conquest
for sure
is it. We see now we have Fire and Blood and
there's so many things in this whole piece, where he says, so it's not a novel, and wants everyone to remain clear on that.
That leaves it open for him to write a novel later.
It does. And he says there's enough stories here to write 20 novels, because that's what he can do. He can take a little story about somebody betrayed somebody, and that's a huge story, and they can take whatever. Because this is going to span over a couple
centuries.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got a couple generations here too, obviously. So, anyways, if you go and read The Sons of the Dragon, I bet it will be a lot like that, because that wasn't a novel, but there was enough in there. There was enough that it was sort of like it wasn't just like, it wasn't like a history book. You would still get some conversations, so and so said this to so and so, and you got some dialogue, but it wasn't necessarily a novel. Right. So it's different. So
yeah. So you think that's what it's going to be like? It's probably similar to that. Okay.
Yeah, and I think there'll be like really important conversations that took place, that you won't have every little back and forth dialogue, whatever. But it's kind of different from what he likes to do. Right. Because in a Game of Thrones, he likes to tell you their eye color, their hair color, their what fruit and vegetables were on the table, But in this, it's more like, here are the bare bones, and all of this could be multiple volumes and novels and what have you. So yeah, it's crazy. It's gonna be wild. But I would imagine it's more. It gives us a little bit more than A World of Ice and Fire. Because it kind of zooms in on just the conquest. Yeah. So,
and obviously a lot less than Game of Thrones. So probably somewhere around maybe what like Dunk and Egg is like. Yeah,
maybe, except for less than that though. Yeah. It's weird. It's gonna be it's gonna be different. That's why I say like to go read The Sons of the Dragon, and I mean it's his book is like the last book.
In that book of stories.
In that book of stories, yeah. But so I skipped right to the end, and it's very different. So,
okay,
but cool. It was a lot of fun.
So, all right. Well, that is it for our Gur watch, as we like to call it. But he does say, as for me, I'm once again returning to the Winds of Winter.
Good, that a boy. And you know what? Honestly, this is why people have criticized him, right? And I think even here and there, I've always said, even back when we first did like the YouTube channel, I was like, let him be. Let him do his thing, because he is just a master writer and is working on this. So, and I didn't want him to rush anything.
Well, I think I like that he is, he's letting other people kind of write stuff. He's just like okaying it and stuff like that, because he does realize, hey, like people really want this content, and so he's like, okay, well, give them content. That's why he goes and he does his readings where he'll read like another chapter from Winds of Winter or something like that, because the demand is so high.
Yeah.
And, I mean, when you look at other book series, like these people write books, and then as you look with like Twilight and Harry Potter and all these kind of things, I don't think these people ever imagined that their books would then get turned into TV shows or movies, and then the demand is that much more.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's dive into the Maester's study here, and as we said at the top of the show, this will be around the doom of Valyria, and so I'll do just a recap, and I'll let Matt kind of jump into this one. Last week we talked about Nymeria and the Roynish Wars, the Royne, and what happened with the Spice Wars, and how all of that was it Garrus, is it the Great or whatever, and how he led 250,000 troops south, and everyone went, and Nymeria was against it, and they just get annihilated. They just get destroyed. They face down 3 dragons, and Mother Royne protects them with her waters. The water wizards are doing everything that they can, but they could not hold off 300 dragons, and that's what they faced. So they were utterly destroyed, and Nymeria sails all over the place. And I do want to say, I have seen a theory since then, Sir Matt, and there is, and I wondered this when I was reading it, and I was like, you'll read something, you'll be like, okay, that's weird, maybe I'm just missing something, maybe I don't see it on the map, I don't understand how she, got past Valentis and Valyria, but perhaps she had help, and perhaps she was not at those battles. She supported, air quote here, and sent her men, with the rest of the troops. But I wonder if there was some secret sort of like she did not support the war effort, and she had warrior, women with her that she kept from the fighting forces. I would say.
Well, here's the thing: when it comes specifically to A World of Ice and Fire, it is told through like the eyes of maesters, and so even Gurr, I believe, has kind of said that, like, well, this book is specifically told through the eyes of maesters. And a YouTube channel that Sir Ezra and I have been watching a lot of is the Order of the Green Hand.
God, those beautiful, wonderful people. They make me so angry, but I love them so much.
I've been listening to a lot of their stuff this week, and they are big believers in that, and that this book should not be taken completely as like 100%.
Absolutely,
actual fact, and and then when you just look at Gurr's writing in general, he sets up so much foreshadowing and so much. He likes to kind of trick you and all this kind of stuff. So, that is something you do kind of have to take. But think about this. So in the show, I mean, in the book as well, people are like, oh, Joffrey was the one that won the Battle of King's Landing, the siege against Stannis Baratheon, right? And Joffrey's like telling everyone, no, I won it. I did it. Right. Even though we all know it was Tyrion.
Right.
But then the people in King's Landing believe that, oh, it was Joffrey. And so then that's where you see discrepancies of what people are talking about. Just look at Jon Snow's parentage, or Ned Stark and Ashara Dane, or Ned Stark and Wyla. You know what I mean? And so even like other people don't agree with these things in the book. So
you're right.
that is I would say a big difference between just A Song of Ice and Fire and everything that it encompasses and other books, whereas other book series are pretty much more, okay, it happened, this is what happened, and here's the story. Yeah. Everything is gray with Gurr. It's all
yeah, and honestly in these history texts, that's what was one of the cool pieces is you have possibly unreliable narrators because they themselves are relying on another possibly unreliable source of information. And the Joffrey situation is a perfect example of that, because I'll briefly just kind of what I saw wasn't even really a theory. Someone just made an offhanded comment about this on a YouTube video we were watching. They said the same thing that I said, which was, how did they get past Valyria? How did Nymeria sail right past south underneath Valyria? I said the same thing too when I was reading it, and I was like, okay, there's more to that then. There's something that happened, and she had some alliance of some kind or bought passage in some way. And I think it could have been something like giving up the location of the army and stuff like that, or things.
There's one thing in here in the chapter we're going to read today, and something that hasn't made sense to me is, the chapter we're going to get into today is about the Doom of Valyria, but it talks about how, okay, so the Dragon Lords, the Valyrians, create Dragonstone, right? They raise Dragonstone, whatever, from the ground, and Dragonstone's right off the shore of Westeros. I mean, it's literally right there. Essos, if you look at where Dragonstone is compared to Essos, it's like way over here. But they have their dragons and they can fly over there. But this chapter talks about how, it says briefly, Valyrian weapons started to filter into Westeros. So on one hand, it tries to make it seem as if they didn't care about Westeros, even though they're right next to it. But they are at least trading with them or something. Somehow these Valyrian steel weapons are getting filtered in there. And so that, they say, for like hundreds of years. So that to me, that seems weird. Like, so what, they're just not worried about like their backyard, like, and then they're just like, oh, I'm still focused on Essos? That doesn't make any, that's just weird.
Well, yeah, or I wonder if it was like they're trading Valyrian steel with Westeros, but it's almost like they don't quite know what all is there. Right. And also they know that they have chased their enemies to Westeros. Yeah. And now they're trading with them and getting, you're right. It almost seems like it is an outpost. They call it an outpost later. Yeah. But like it's like a far western outpost. It's as far west as their empire went. And it's almost like it's also a scouting ground too. Yeah. To scout out, like that would be, and it is, the launching point of an attack of some kind if they were going to have one.
Yeah, which
you know?
we'll get to this chapter. But yeah, Sir Ezra brings up a good point about the Nymeria stuff too. Yeah, that's the thing. Especially these early chapters in this book are quite vague.
Yeah. Yes, they are. Yep. So remember that as we get into the Doom of Valyria.
Mm-hmm.
So
here I just have some sections I really specifically want to kind of talk about here. So the Doom of Valyria is always described as something happened where as we've kind of discussed, the Valyrians. So you had the first men who moved out of Essos, the Andals who sailed over, and then you have kind of the Rhoynar who come over here. So now you still have the Valyrian Empire over there.
Yep.
With the destruction of the Rhoynar, Valyria soon achieved complete domination of the western half of Essos, from the Narrow Sea to Slaver's Bay, and from the Summer Sea to the Shivering Sea. Slaves poured into the freehold and were quickly dispatched beneath the 14 flames to mine the precious gold and silver the freeholders loved so well. Perhaps in preparation for their crossing of the Narrow Sea, the Valyrians also established their westernmost outpoint on the isle that would become known as Dragonstone, some 200 years before the Doom. No king opposed them, and though the local lords of the Narrow Sea made some effort to resist it, the strength of Valyria was too great. With their arcane arts, the Valyrians raised the citadel at Dragonstone. During the next 2 centuries, Valyrian steel would trickle through the 7 kingdoms, and it would not be uncommon to see a dragon flying above the Blackwater Bay. And then it says Valyria continued, however, to focus on matters of their native continent.
Yep.
And so, to this day, no one knows what caused the Doom of Valyria. Most say that it was a natural cataclysm, a catastrophic event caused by the eruption of the 14 flames together. And the 14 flames, by the way, is like a series of like kind of volcanoes, and that's actually our vocab word for today. So we'll kind of save that, but it's mentioned quite a bit when you talk about old Valyria.
Yeah.
Some septums, less wise, claim it was the Valyrians brought disaster on themselves for their promiscuous beliefs in 100 gods and more, and in their godlessness they delved too deep and unleashed the fires of the 7 hells on the freehold. A handful of maesters, influenced by the fragments of work of Septim Barth, hold that Valyria used spells of the 14 flames for thousands of years, that their ceaseless hunger for slaves and wealth as much to sustain these spells as to expand their power, and that the last of those spells faltered and the cataclysm became inevitable. So even in that little passage right there, I mean, listen to this maester says this maester say this, some believe this. So again, you just have to kind of take kind of everything as
and they use spells to tame the 14 flames
right
for thousands of years. That their ceaseless hunger for slaves and wealth was as much to sustain these spells, so as it was to expand their power. Yeah, there's I mean, that's interesting. That little bit. I mean, it sort of feels like it's laced with some truth, but then also we don't completely understand it.
Yeah. Doesn't the Doom of Valyria sound quite like something else, another kind of cataclysmic event that happened that is also described just as vaguely? The breaking of the neck.
Yeah.
Like, well, maybe it was a spell, maybe it was like an earthquake. We don't really know. Like,
where you've got the stepstones still and stuff like that. Yeah, that whole piece where the arm was broken. That would be very similar. Yeah. And was that magic?
Or
was
the arm?
Spells?
Excuse me, not the neck. The arm.
Yeah, but you were right in that the neck is where they were casting those from. They were up near the Isle of Faces, and it was believed that there could have been some spell work done up in that area they did try something at the neck.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
They did, and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
Remember, they were trying to basically split, like cut off north from south at the neck. So that failed. Yeah. But the breaking of the arm apparently could have been, a successful attempt.
Yeah. So okay, here. So then one thing that can be said for certain is that it was a cataclysm such as the world had never seen. The ancient mighty freehold, home to the dragons, to sorcerers of unraveled skill, was shattered and destroyed within hours. It was written that every hill for 500 miles split asunder to fill the air with ash and smoke and fire, so hot and hungry that even the dragons in the sky were engulfed and consumed. The time of the dragons in Essos was at an end. So then it kind of goes on to mention what kind of happened to the Valyrian Empire. Volantis, the mightiest of the free cities, quickly laid claim to Valyria's mantle. Many of the men and women of noble Valyrian blood, though not dragon lords, called for their war upon other cities. The Tigers, as those who advocated conquest came to be known, led Volantis into a great conflict with other free cities. So this is where you see these other Valyrian kind of folk coming about, and this is kind of how we get into like the cell swords and a lot of this kind of stuff in Essos. And then sorry, Sir Ezra, I didn't have this in my notes here, but we both have the book open in front of us. So then we kind of see this Targaryen dragon lord known as Aegon Targaryen, who kind of
big deal.
He kind of ends up becoming involved in these struggles. His ancestors had long looked east, but his attention, even from an early age, had always been focused on the West.
Yeah, and I think wasn't he in charge? Well, let's see. Or no, he just remembers that old Western, Dragonstone, and so decides to go there later on. That's next chapter. But yes, you're right. Volantis, and sometimes I've used those interchangeably, like Valyria, Volantis, just because they kind of do launch that's where people who were close. It's when you think of the Roman Empire, right, and people who were out away from it when it fell and stuff. Those would be the people who were like, wait, we're still good, right? We're still at war. And
when I was thinking about this, it actually reminds me so much of Rome, in that Rome got so big. At one point, Rome had to have 4 emperors, and then it kept growing, and then of course, Rome, the city of Rome, fell, but then it kind of turned into the Byzantine Empire. And so it kind of sounds like that's kind of similar to what happens here. And maybe that's where Gur was drawing his inspiration from, as we talked about during our Fallout Friday, the War of the Roses and stuff like that. Well, if you look at European history, what's the first huge empire is Rome, and then it kind of splits over time and does its own thing, and then other empires kind of start to grow and stuff like that. So
yeah, I kind of want to read a little bit of this.
Go ahead.
So, because this is kind of interesting to me, that they led Volantis into great conflict with other free cities. They had great success at first, right? Their fleets and their armies. I mean, again, you imagine this. How far did this empire spread? And anybody who needed to fall back and check in on, what was happening in Valyria, that happened within hours. I can't imagine that all the armies and all their whole empire is immediately destroyed. It sounds like they're consolidating, or if they're leaderless, they're being taken over by some of the other princes and freeholds.
And I mean, to reference another source material here, how quickly does the empire fall when the Death Star, the second Death Star, is blown up?
Exactly. There's remnants. There's
tons of remnants and things like that. So
it looks like here. Let's see. It was only when they had overreached and attempted to seize Tyrosh as well that their empire collapsed. Unnerved by the Volantine aggression, Pentos actually joins with the Tyroshi in resistance. Mir and Lys rebelled, and the Sea Lord of Braavos provided a fleet of 100 ships to aid Lys. So they kind of get together, right? And they also get a little help from the Westerosi Storm King, right? He helps them into the disputed lands in return for promise of gold and glory that defeated a Volantine host attempting to retake Mir.
Yeah.
Near the end, even the future conqueror, the still young Aegon Targaryen, became involved in the struggle. His ancestors had long looked east, but as you said, he's turning his attention west. Still, Pentos and Tyrosh approached him, inviting him to join a grand alliance against Volantis. He listened, and for reasons unknown to this day, he chose to heed their call to a point. Say what?
Yeah, mounting the Black Dread, it is said that he flew to the east, meeting with the Prince of Pentos and the Magisters of the Free City, and from there flew Balerin to Lys in time to set ablaze a Volantine fleet that was preparing to invade the Free City.
Wow. So he basically, I mean, he has his own dragon and basically switches sides.
Yep. Yeah.
Sterncloak.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
The first of the Blackfire. And then so then the big thing I have here, it's a little bit further down on the page there. As for Aegon Targaryen, shortly after his role in defeating Volantis, it is written that he lost all interest in affairs of the East. Believing Volantis' rule at an end, he flew back to Dragonstone, and now no longer distracted by the wars of Essos, he turned his gaze west.
Wow, that is actually epic. I did not realize that he joined up with Pentos and Tyrosh there, to be honest with you. So
yeah, guys, next week is actually, I believe, Aegon's Conquest, and it is a huge chapter. So
yeah, that's one of those that we might still do at the front, or we could do a quick reread, get the reread done, and then.
So I believe we might have lucked out this week, and next week's reread chapter might be quite short. So
yeah, from what I know with it, John, I actually listened to it today. It's not that long, not much longer. It's just barely longer than Tyrion's chapter. So okay, that takes us into the reread today. We are going to recap here shortly and talk about last chapter. We were. Point of view there was Bran, correct? So just in recap there, Matt, you want to read through some of that, and then I'll do the summary?
Bran had been left behind while his older brother Robb joins the hunt. No one can find Jon Snow. He's off being angry. Jon and Arya are girls and not, going on the hunt. So Bran just decides to start climbing, and then he comes across a conversation in which he runs into Jaime Lannister and the Queen, and he has a fall.
He does have a fall. He does. So let's see, and if there's anything, I don't think there's anything we got from our listeners that we need to in recap. Nothing really.
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, so if you guys do have thoughts for the recap or things that you'd like to talk about, from last week, please send this to us, even if it's like chapter 1, and you just kind of jump in here and you're listening and you want to send us something about chapter 1 or chapter 2 that we missed. I mean, that's our time to kind of recap the story overall, not just the last chapter, but just in general. So send us those. Send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com, or just send us a message on Facebook or post a comment on the thread. Each week we post a thread on Facebook. So the summary for this week, our Tyrion chapter. Tyrion is shook from his reading when he hears a direwolf howling in the distance. It's been a long night of reading in the Sept at Winterfell. Tyrion heads out to find his brother and sister, but not before he runs into his nephew, Joffrey Baratheon. He scolds his nephew for not paying his respects to Lord and Lady Stark. Tyrion finds his family eating breakfast and discusses the condition of young Bran. And so it's very short, but there is some meaningful, stuff in here that we'll get to. Yeah. And I think you divide this into a couple, into two halves for us, Sir Matt.
Yeah. Normally we do thirds, but again, these past couple chapters are short here. So first part I would say is Tyrion speaks to Joffrey and the Hound, and then Tyrion speaks to Jaime and Cersei.
Yeah.
So, the first part is basically Tyrion. It is kind of interesting, and maybe we should dive into this later. When Tyrion is speaking, he's at the library, and he's kind of doing some research there. But then he just ends up walking out to the yard, and where he runs into Joffrey and the Hound, and he basically tells Joffrey, "Hey, he says, why aren't you haven't spoken, you haven't
paid your respects."
You haven't paid your respects to Lord and Lady Stark,
right?
And it has been noted. And Joffrey, kind of brushes it off, and then Tyrion slaps him in the face.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that is not the smartest thing. It's what does the Hound say? The little prince will remember that.
Yeah.
Right? And that's true. He will. But what's crazy is and we're going to get into it here, the difference between Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella. Mm-hmm. You know, they're just so different. I was really struck by that when I was reading earlier. And then real quickly for me, one thing that I was looking at the beginning of this is that there's a sept in Winterfell.
Yeah.
And you kind of forget there's a library.
Uh-huh.
And there's a septon there, which you totally forget about. What's the name? Shale?
He even says, like, this is one of the best copies of this scroll I've ever seen.
It was the only complete,
you know. It's Valyrian scroll. It's a Valyrian scroll. It's dry. You know, it's very rare. It's quite rare.
Right. And
yours is the only complete. It's the, what is that word? Engnes of War is quite rare, and yours is the only complete copy I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, that is kind of neat that they have that because you don't think of the Starks as being like
very studious.
Yeah, and again, this is something that he made for Kat, right?
Yeah.
Didn't he build this for her?
Mm-hmm.
So, was it there before?
Yeah, I don't know.
You know,
but when you go back in time though, and you look at some of the older Stark lines, like Brandon the Builder, perhaps he was probably very studious. You know, and
yeah. And I'm sure they probably had a library, and maybe it's just like you're right. The library itself is still there, but it was just kind of interesting that he's sitting with the septon, you know, and they're reading together or whatever in the library. So, and again, it goes back to tell us more about Tyrion. He has studied so much. You know, he would know something. I mean, what other lord can you think of that would know, you know, that was a rare edition of a book?
Right.
You know what I mean? He's got that obscure knowledge. I don't know. It's really interesting.
Well, later he goes on to say, like, I read because, you know, I have to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, he hears the chatter and what's going on down in the yard, and you know, I mean, gosh, Joffrey's saying things like,
you know, maybe that I couldn't sleep because of the wolf.
Yeah.
And
Crimea River. Joffrey.
Yeah, and the Hound, Sandor Clegane, says I could take care of it for you, and he says, "Send a dog to kill a dog." You know.
Yeah, he's just such an idiot. He's such an idiot. Well, that's funny. That's real funny, Joffrey.
But then when he has this conversation with, you know, Tavi, when he's having his conversation here with when he shows up to Tyrion shows up, and the Hound is kind of like a voice from nowhere, spirits of the air. The Hound is, you know, kind of making fun of him too. So the Hound and Joffrey's relationship is also quite interesting. And I just, you know, finished my reread of the first book the other day, and I don't know. I don't really get it. Sometimes I feel like he likes him, and other times I feel like
he's just playing.
He just doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah. He's just playing this game, and maybe as Joffrey gets older and crueler, he starts to realize how bad Joffrey is. But like right here,
because remember he saves Joffrey's life at the end of the first book when Joffrey makes Sansa go out and look at Ned Stark's head, and Sansa kind of realizes I could just push him off the edge right here, right now.
Yeah.
She's like, I'd probably die too. And I think she was going to, but then the Hound steps in front of her.
Yeah, and I think he also did that for her too.
Right, yeah.
Because he starts to have a real, connection with her. Like, he really cares for her. But it's very subtle, and it's very hard to see. But you're right. It's very different. Like he says things, like the little prince will remember that. I'm like, is he just? And he doesn't seem like, from the show, obviously,
right.
He's a man who's worried about rising in power and stuff like that. He's he's more somber in the show, and in this it seems like he's egging the prince on a little bit, saying what he wants to hear,
right?
Stuff like that.
But he does say that. He says, say what when he's talking to Sansa, when Sansa at the end, when the first book, when Sansa is like in her, he's bringing her down to court, and he's like, just do what he says, just nod, and smile, and everything will be fine. Yeah,
what is also too. You just have to be smart enough to play that game. He knows exactly how to probably manipulate and push the right buttons, and he's been around this boy prince for so long that he knows how to manipulate him.
Although he does let Tyrion slap him. So, but at this point, he's of course they're both just
for sure.
Yeah. So he can get away with that. So
yeah.
But he knows that someday he'll probably be king.
Well, what's crazy is you forget Tyrion is their uncle.
Right.
And you really get that from Tommen and Myrcella here in a second. Like, you really see they want to know. They think he knows, and they think, Tyrion would know the answers. Like, let's ask Uncle Tyrion. And it's just like, kind of forget that that's the cool relationship that he has and stuff. So we'll get there in just a sec.
Right.
So Tyrion speaks to Joffrey. Yeah, anything else we wanted to talk about there? I think...
that's pretty much it. Joffrey just says that, the Stark boy is nothing to me. I can't abide by the wailing of women. That's when Tyrion slaps him. Mm-hmm. And then Joffrey says, one word Tyrion said, and I'll hit you again. I'm going to tell mother, Joffrey explains. Tyrion hits him again, and now both cheeks flamed. You tell your mother, Tyrion told him, but first you get yourself to Lord and Lady Stark and fall on your knees in front of them, and you will tell them how very sorry you are. And, and he says, do you understand? And then Joffrey looks like he's going to cry. Instead, he managed a weak nod. Then he turned and fled headlong from the yard, holding his cheek. Tyrion watched him run.
Yeah. And, when Joffrey's not there and his conversation with Sandor is a little different, Clegane changes in a sense, and it's just like obeys his commands and his orders. He wants to know where is Robert still asleep or whatever, and he just doesn't mess around with him, just gives him a straight answer. And then when he asks where his brother and sister are, he tells him exactly where they're at.
Yeah, breaking fast with the queen.
Yeah, there's no more horsing around, though. You know what I'm saying? It's a change in tone a little bit, and I think that's just because the presence of Joffrey. He is literally just has a facade when Joffrey's there, and he plays his part. Mm-hmm. He's a little bit more, not half. He's like an eighth, like jester, like when he has to be. Like he laughs at his jokes, or he provides him with fodder for good joke making. I don't know. Yeah. It's something.
That's why the Hound is when he has during the siege of the King's Landing, when he's like, no, I'm done with this. I'm good. I'm out.
Yeah. Exactly.
And stuff like that.
Yep, you're right. Okay, and then now we get into Tyrion speaks to Jaime and Cersei here, mm-hmm. and this conversation is interesting. You kind of get to see this dynamic between the three of them, and you learn a lot about, just Tyrion. You learn that Tyrion knows. You learn that he knows. Essentially,
he knows right away.
He knows. He almost knows exactly what happened.
Yeah,
and he knows about his brother and his sister.
Yeah.
And he hasn't said anything to anybody, really, right? Yeah. He probably even knows the true parentage of all the children.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
Sure he does, right? Absolutely. Yeah. He's not an idiot.
Do you think so? Then I don't want to get super far off of this, but there is some kind of things, and I think this is really kind of one of the only chapters where you really actually get to see like Jaime with all of the kids at once. In fact, this may be actually the only chapter where you really get to see them. And Tyrion talks later. Tyrion's saying something, and Cersei yells at him and says, "Get out! The children don't need to hear this filth."
Yeah,
but it doesn't seem to me that like Tommen or Myrcella, really come across as, when you think of like the characteristics of Jaime and Cersei.
Yeah,
like I just don't like both those characters just don't seem to me like they're kids,
unrelated.
Yeah, maybe it's just that they're both so young, but like you would like, I mean, look at Sansa, and look at like, people are always saying, well, Sansa is so much like her mother. Right. I mean, if Myrcella's should be anything like her mother, I mean, I don't feel like we ever get her like really playing this Game of Thrones.
Right, and I'm trying to find the line where he talks specifically about Myrcella and talks about how beautiful she is, just like her mother, but that she doesn't have her mother's nature.
Yeah.
And that was, a comfort to Tyrion. Every time he would see her, looks just like her, but nothing like her in nature. Yeah. Very like.
Yeah, I wonder why Myrcella and Tommen are really not really anything like Jaime and Cersei. Because we get so much about Joffrey, where later Cersei is questioning whether or not, at least in the show, Cersei questions. She's like, is it like our, it's like the Targaryens? Is this our curse? Is Joffrey our curse for? being together.
Well, and also you don't really see that could be, and you can also see where we don't know what their interaction is like, if there is any, with Robert Baratheon.
Yeah,
which is crazy to think about. But does he influence them in some way?
Yeah, because I don't think we ever hear Tommen at all mention his dad, and the only time Joffrey mentions his dad is when he because I was watching scenes yesterday from the show, the interaction, the Tywin Joffrey moments. Because those moments are great because Tywin just it's almost like Joffrey is scared of Tywin Lannister, where Tywin is the real power. And it's great.
It is great.
He's like, the king is tired, take him to bed.
I know.
Keep in mind, this is the same king who said off with Ned Stark's head.
I know. I know. And Tywin is pissed about that.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's a dishonorable thing to do, and it was just under his own children's watch.
It was also a terrible, terrible move.
Yeah. Yep. So, anyways, but yeah, no, they are very different. And you get this conversation with Prince Tommen spoke up. Do you have any news of Bran, Uncle? I stopped by the sick room last night. There was no change. The Maester thought that a hopeful sign. And then Tommen says, I don't want Bran to die. He was a sweet boy, not like his brother. But then Jaime and Tyrion were somewhat less than peas in a pod themselves. Lord Eddard had a brother named Brandon as well, Jaime mused. One of the hostages murdered by Targaryen. It seems to be an unlucky name. And this is something that he talks about, letting his brother slide on some stuff, because his brother is one of the only people who's ever shown him kindness and respect and compassion and love, perhaps.
Yeah, that line actually, it seems to be an unlucky name, is my quote of this week.
Yeah,
we can come back to that, because that's going to take us more down the Stark line, and what does this line mean of anything, and stuff like that. So we can save that for a bit, but let's keep going here.
Yeah. So he says, not so unlucky as all that, surely. And Cersei says, what do you mean? And then Tyrion is just playing him here a little bit. He gives him this crooked smile. Why only that Tommen may get his wish. The Maester thinks the boy may yet live. He took a sip of beer. Myrcella gives a happy gasp, and Tommen's smiling, right? Then there's this glance that passed between Jaime and Cersei, lasted no more than a second, but he did not miss it. Then his sister dropped her gaze to the table. That is no mercy. They go on to kind of say, it'd be better.
Yeah, the Northern gods are cruel.
Yeah, just to let him die. And even I think Jaime kind of says later on, if he were my son, I would, put him out of his misery, etc., or whatever. Yeah, and Tyrion's not an idiot. He knows what's going on. He caught that glance. He was looking for that glance to be exchanged, and there it is. There's confirmation.
Well, Tyrion, the thing about Tyrion is that he knows he's smarter than most everyone else, and so he because he tries to be smarter than everyone else. And I think this is Gur wanting to, so think about this. This is big, as we've been kind of saying here. These early chapters in this book specifically are huge, because this is because now we're so far removed and we have so many other hundreds of characters, but these are the characters that Gur had a plan for right out of the gate. So this is the first chapter we get. Well, we have Daenerys' chapter, but she's over in Essos, right? So yeah, I mean, her stuff you can kind of say is kind of removed from this main storyline here, I suppose. So this is the first Lannister point of view chapter we get, and it's Tyrion, and you get the sense that Tyrion's okay. Maybe these Baratheons, these Lannisters, maybe they're not all bad. Tyrion doesn't really seem that bad from the two times we've seen him. Every time they've brought up Jaime Lannister, he's one, pushed Bran out of a window. Yep. And two, he's he stabbed the king in the back. Right. And so, that's
no, yeah. I think that's a good point. You have to have, and that's why in each and every family, you've got warring families, but is there someone who you could fall in love with? And you look at the young wolf and what happens to him on the battlefield, with his enemy, who he had just conquered, and ends up, marrying one of their own. So you're right. Yeah, there's someone in each house that we kind of have to. That's what's so neat about this story is that, we love Sam Tarly, but we really don't like his father. And his
Right.
brothers just we're kind of iffy on
Right.
in the show because we don't really know. I mean, he's raised that way, you know.
Well, even if you look at Cersei, there are times. I mean, more often than not, Cersei. You know, at this point, Cersei's one of the main, I guess you could say, villains of the show. But that's kind of Gur's thing. Is Gur's like, I don't really write heroes and villains. I just write characters.
Yeah.
And I mean, when Cersei's going through the stuff with the Septums,
Yeah.
you're rooting for her.
Yeah, yeah. And there are times where you are rooting for her, where she is ready to, when she talks about her children.
Yeah.
And when you hear her story about her betrothal to Robert Baratheon.
And you realize Robert Baratheon was kind of a dick.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, exactly. And she, at one point, loved him and actually tried to bear a child for him.
Yeah.
And lost it and was actually really upset about it.
Yeah.
And it might even have tried another time after that.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. And then even after,
So
like,
I know that
time,
she tried to have one, or he did actually get her pregnant, but then at least she says to Ned Stark, "Well, Jaime and I found a way to get rid of it."
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's when she's having the
She's confronted.
Yeah, when they're having that conversation right before like all hell breaks loose.
But that might have been because she
does. I think she does. Yeah.
She does have. Doesn't she have a stillborn child?
Mm-hmm. I think so. So I think she does.
Because when she's talking to Robert, you know,
Yeah.
she like that is a grieving point for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Because then there's oh gosh, because that even happens after on the night of their wedding or whatever, the bedding ceremony, where he says Lyanna's name.
He calls her Lyanna. Yeah.
Even after that, though, she still is
Right.
like fighting through it. Okay, well, look, he's just.
Because I believe she says like I loved you once, and it was when she saw him, like
Yeah.
when he's walking, and he looks he's clean shaven and he's knightly and
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, I think during those times she did try to. I bet you she left Jaime. She wasn't with Jaime, you know, and was like trying to be a good queen and knew that life had to change. But then when that didn't work and he was just this, as you say, a dick, you know, then she's like, well, I'm going to roll back to my brother and I'm just going to cling to my family and stuff. So you do kind of root for her a little bit in that regard. And then she just turns into a straight evil, you know, witch. So, but as this conversation continues, you know, Tyrion just kind of talks more about what they're going to do next and kind of gives the kids hope. And then among the parents there, kind of gives there's some. They're dreading the possibility that that Bran would wake up, and they talk about leaving soon.
Yeah. By the way, I just looked it up here. I have the wiki pulled up here. It says after the conclusion of Robert's rebellion, a marriage was arranged between Cersei and the new king, Robert Baratheon. Cersei says that Jaime and Cersei did, however, hook up the morning of her wedding.
Okay.
But nonetheless, Cersei was first enthralled by the happy crowds at the royal wedding. However, her enthusiasm for the match ended when Robert called her Lyanna during their first night together. The marriage rapidly deteriorated. And so it says it had 3 kids. So maybe she was pregnant later. And then that was the one she like got. It says unwilling to give birth to Robert's child, she sent Jaime out a woman to cleanse her. So it seems that maybe she was pregnant, stillborn, and then later during some of the other kids.
Yeah.
Is when she had her abortion.
Okay, that's the thing, because she had a stillborn.
Right.
That was Robert's child, right? So then you're saying that she aborted another baby?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we were both correct. We were both just...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not, I don't remember that part, but so I just know that she, you know, at one point in time she did love him for sure. So, okay. So anyways, they're talking about leaving, and she basically says, you know, Tyrion kind of mentions that he is not, you know, leaving with them, and they're a little struck by that, and says he's going to the wall, and they kind of tease him a little bit. You know, Jaime says, "You're going to take the black." And then this is when they start talking about whores and, you know, being celibate and things like that. And that's where Cersei says the kids don't need to hear this filth, you know, and kind of, you know, takes them out, gets them out of the room or whatever, and talks more about their about the idea of Ned Stark not actually leaving Winterfell and going down to King's Landing. Jaime regarded his brother thoughtfully with those cool green eyes. Stark would never consent to leave Winterfell with his son lingering in the shadow of death. Tyrion says he will if Robert commands it, and Robert will command it. There is nothing Lord Eddard can do for the boy in any case. All right, and then that's where Jaime kind of says that he could end his torment.
Right. And then Tyrion goes on to say, Tyrion replied with a shrug and an antiquated twist of his shoulders, speaking for their grotesques, because he's saying it's worse than being a cripple. I beg to differ. Death is so terribly final, while life is so full of possibilities. And that's another one of those lines that has been highlighted 5,453 times.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's the reason being is because Jaime is literally the one who goes through that. You know, his hand is taken from him, and I think there are times where he wishes he maybe could die, but then realizes all the different possibilities. You know,
we'll even look at Bran. If Bran Bran becomes the three-eyed crow or the three-eyed raven. Instead of dying. So
yeah, it's just the irony that he's speaking to Jaime.
Yeah.
You know, who's the one who's calling him a grotesque.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
And then it ironically happens to him.
Yeah.
Later on. So, so anyways, Tyrion then, poking the bear a little bit, says, "I hope the boy does wake. I would be most interested into hearing what he has to say." And his his smile, changes, and he's just sort of like, "I wonder which side you were on." He starts to kind of, because it's like this unspoken thing that Tyrion knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And why would you want that? They're too smart. Like Tyrion's smarter, but they're smart enough to they have to know that their younger brother suspects.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're at least that smart. So anyways, he says,
my Jaime, my sweet brother, he says, you wound me. You know how much I love my family.
Yeah. Right. And the irony there is he does know how much he loves / does not love his family.
Well, I think
his treatment.
I think that Tyrion actually does love his family. It's just that his family doesn't love him back.
Yeah.
I think that it's never that the things that Tyrion does is never because he outright hates his family. It's because Tywin Lannister treats him, with disdain, and then Cersei also doesn't like him either.
Right. Yep. So really, it's just Jaime that he loves Jaime, and Jaime loves them. So it's sort of a through association,
right?
Love anymore, So
and then it's questionable whether or not Jaime and Cersei love each other at the end.
Yeah.
At least in the show, it seems like Jaime's saying no, we're done here. So
yeah, he doesn't show a lot of emotion, and of course he can't really, but for his air quote here children, right? Yeah. But isn't it later on he does show, after Robert Baratheon is gone, some emotion and stuff, and so and it's the actions of his sister that cause a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Well, he does at least in the show. Doesn't he try to tell Marcella like, "Oh, hey, I'm your."
In the show,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't think that's in the. I don't think that's
in the book right now. She is en route to.
Right. She's coming back.
I don't know. I can't remember exactly where she's at. I know she was fleeing in some regard. There was somebody tried to assassinate her, I think, and she's saved by one of the King's Guard.
Yeah,
what do you got?
During Kevin discusses the preparations are made for Marcella's return, so she's returning.
Preparations were made.
Yeah, for her return from
in the book.
In the book, yeah.
Where does she end up though? Where is she at currently in the book?
I believe she's still in Dorne. This is because it ends during her imprisonment by the Faith. Cersei Lannister learns of Gerald's attack on her daughter from her uncle, Sir Kevin Lannister. Kevin tells her that Marcella blames Darkstar for both the attack on her as well as the death of Aris. During a meeting of the small council, Kevin discusses the preparations for Marcella's return. The princess has begun her journey to King's Landing with Nymeria.
Oh, Nymeria Sand?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's possibly where she'll be, if it's true to the show,
Yeah.
where she'll be assassinated, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's poisoned in the show, isn't she?
Yeah, like the kiss or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly why all this was going on though with her.
Well, Tyrion, when he's Hand of the King, basically marries her off
Right, yeah.
to Dorne. Yeah.
But no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like the when she's in Dorne, there's a subplot that's going on with Ariana Martell, and they're trying to involve Marcella in this subplot. And I don't know. I think it's a move against the Prince of Dorne.
Okay.
Dorne Martell.
Dorne Martell, yeah.
Yeah, so I can't remember exactly, because that's true in the show, too. They do plot against him. And I think a part of this is some foreshadowing as to, like they wanted her to be, they want her to be the queen, right?
Right,
I think
yeah,
she's
yeah.
next in line, that sort of piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. To get revenge against the Lannisters for the deaths of Oberyn and Elia Martell, Arianne schemes to crown Marcella queen after Joffrey's death. Since Marcella is older than Tommen, Arianna hopes that the Dornishmen will rise to defend her claim for a chance to war against the Lannisters, who would be expected to support Tommen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they're using her essentially so that they could cause some war.
As we've been saying, the shows and the book are so different. She may not die.
Right, she may not.
In the books. And maybe we do get a thing between her and Jaime, like a moment between her and Jaime.
Yeah. Interesting. I was looking at where Tommen names the one of the ships after his sister. Like the relationship between those two is interesting to me as well. But we can get into that more later.
Yeah.
Just kind of a sidebar. So, all right, on to cool connections. Do we have any cool connections for this week?
So the cool connections for this week, I'm doing the 14 Flames, which we talked about in our World of Ice and Fire book. So basically, it's an immense chain of volcanoes extending across the now shattered Valyrian Peninsula. There were deep mines beneath the 14 Flames, and the fires lit the Valyrian freehold knights of old. The Valyrians were originally a shepherding folk of the Valyrian Peninsula when they discovered the dragons lairing in the 14 Flames.
Yeah.
However, their rise to power began. The Valyrians believed that the dragons were the children of the volcanoes. Valyria sent slaves of 100 different nations to mine beneath the 14 Flames, searching for gold, silver, and other ores. The worst slaves were sent down to die in the red darkness of the mines. The mines of old Valyria were always hot, and they grew hotter as shafts were driven deeper into the earth. The slaves toiled in an oven, the rocks around them too hot to touch. The air stank of brimstone and seared the slaves' lungs as they breathed. Sometimes when they broke through a wall in search of gold, they would find steam, boiling water, or molten rock. Certain shafts were cut so low that slaves had to crawl or bend. Sometimes fireworms were encountered in the red darkness in the shafts of the mines or by the slaves, leaving only burnt and blackened corpses. Yet some of the mines dove deeper. Slaves perished by the score, but their masters did not care. The doom of Valyria, an eruption of all of the 14 Flames, destroyed the Valyrian freehold. Great earthquakes destroyed settlements, mountains exploded, and fires burned so hot that even dragons were killed. The Valyrian Peninsula became separated from the now ruined lands of the Long Summer by the Smoking Sea. And we kind of talked a little bit about this in the World of Ice and Fire here. Yeah. So that's kind of it about the 14 Flames. But it is interesting. So maybe that's this, because the dragons, dragon eggs are talked about coming from like beyond Ashai, and then we see dragons coming from Valyria. And, some theorize that maybe there's ice dragons, in the land of always winter. So just because the Targaryens maybe have the power to control these dragons, you kind of look at them together. Who knows? Maybe the Night King is also part Targaryen. You never know, and that's why he can. That's why he has. Why he can control an ice dragon.
Yeah, exactly. So when you were, let's see, you got some quotes in here. Did you read all these quotes too?
No, I didn't read these quotes.
Just what is this, Tyrion?
These are just quotes from the that where they mention it from.
Where they mention it. Okay, gotcha. Because I was wondering where, like, was it? Did you say that it was destroyed or it wasn't destroyed? We don't know.
Well, I mean, they're volcanoes, so I think it was part of. I think they're still mostly there, but it destroyed the cities of Valyria.
For sure. That's my is it. So if this is where they found dragons. You know what I mean? If this is where dragons sort of originated from,
potentially, yeah.
Well, because the Valyrians, doesn't it say that at one point they were goat herders and sheep? They're herdsmen, right? And then they discovered these dragons, right?
Yeah.
And made a connection with them. So they don't really come from Volantis or Valyria, but they come from the 14 Flames.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think.
Is that what it's saying?
I think so, but the Valyria is like right there. I mean, it's.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's right. It's in the middle of the.
Yeah.
It's the middle of the sea.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like it's away. It's actually so. Valyria is here and it's over here.
Yeah.
So they were sending slaves down to it. So I'm saying, is it still there? Is my question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So
I don't think it really says.
And if it doesn't say, that's fine. But it seems like a mysterious place that's like dangerous and
it says,
where they're mining.
Yeah, the doom of Valyria, an eruption of all the 14 flames destroyed the Valyrian freehold. Great earthquakes, but it doesn't say that the.
And so it says all the 14 flames were part of the eruption.
Yeah.
Okay. So could it still be there, remnants of it, etc.
Yeah.
But the 14 flames, but the way it shows it on this map here is it's just one spot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Or is it showing it in multiple spots?
I think it's just showing that one spot. An immense chain of volcanoes extending across the now shattered Valyrian peninsula. So maybe it was there, maybe because now it's shattered.
Yeah, because I don't know. I'm just looking at the one that you put in here. So this one,
that's the one from the wiki.
Are you saying that's 14 flames? The red dot.
That's what the wiki appears to make it.
Because over here is a shy.
Yeah.
And then you've got Old Gis is actually to the east of it, and then Valyria would be back to the west. So just kind of interesting where that is located, and that's something that is probably not well.
Oh no, sorry. When I pulled it from the wiki, it changed it. There's the 14 Flames is actually in the.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
That makes way more sense.
All right, gotcha. Because that's really confusing. So it is then right in the freehold.
Right.
It's right in the freehold. Okay, and it is not. So there are, when you look at the different maps and pre-Doom, post-Doom, there are a few things still there, like a few islands and what have you, and they're probably just under it's the water, what have you. I don't know. It could just be that they're. So there's still something there, I guess is my point. Is that could you go back to that point, and since all the land is sort of destroyed, like in ships, possibly see dragons there again.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Just because you've got the eggs that Daenerys has, but is there a possibility that there could be more coming back?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my question. With that candle being lit again in Old Town, it's lit.
It's just a candle. I'm with the Maesters on that one. It's just a candle.
Just a candle.
It's supposed to light.
But they couldn't light it. So that's why, they couldn't light it, so they're pissed.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, so cool. There's some cool connections for you guys, just a little bit of extra stuff. We have we're going to move into the next section here. So send us a raven. We really do want to thank you guys for all of your support here on the show. We get new listeners every week. It's been wild trying to keep track of it all, but it is a lot of fun. And again, the purpose of this too is to create a club and a community and a place where we can kind of learn from you guys. We learn new stuff from Lord Adam Parker and Kelsey and Kat and Lady Kat and Maester Evans and all these different people. Maester Deshane, all these different folks. You learn when they send us, comments and thoughts and stuff throughout the week. We do more research. It sends on a tangent this way. I think Matty V and Aziz have done some really good jobs sending us in different tangents. Those guys have got us all over Westeros and Essos, which is fine, which is great. And that's the whole point. We've got this lull until November 20th.
Yeah.
So stick with us, okay? And let's learn as much as we can, and let's just keep reading through this series, because that's the great part about books. You can return to them, and there's more there each time. The first time you watch a movie, you want people to be like, oh, that was good. That was good. And then when you come back the second time, you want there to be things that you didn't see the first time.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, well, I didn't see that the first time. Look at that. I just caught that Easter egg. And then a third time, there's even more.
And not only that, but as we learn new information, and even when you pick up, as Sir Ezra just said, old information you didn't realize, it causes other information.
Yep.
To like now, every time Old Nan speaks, I'm like, okay,
what's she saying?
Yeah. Big.
You're over analyzing what to the extreme, which is good.
And then as we dive in on like our follow-up Friday, when we start talking about theories, that causes you to look at information differently as well. I just listened to a theory, I guess, play again, the Order of the Green Hand, that Old Nan is Lady Weber from the Dunk and Egg series. And now every time I hear Spock speak, I'm like, wow, that changes a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting. I will say for the Order of the Green Hand that they at least have picked a theory and they have stuck with it.
Yeah. And
they have woven it into
everything
that they do, which is very unique.
Yeah.
So because they're big believers that it's not R plus L equals J, their big theory is it's in
N plus A equals J.
Yeah. Right?
Ned and Ashara Dane.
Ashara Dane. Yeah. And so they're all about House Dane.
Yeah.
And to be quite honest with you, this all may go that way. I think it actually may legitimately go that way. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, it looks like they're hinting at R plus L plus J a lot.
Yeah.
And this other piece with Ned and Ashara is meant to throw us off, but really it might be the real thing.
It might be the other way around.
It's just crazy.
Right.
It's absolutely crazy. And that's the approach they've taken, and they've stuck in with it. So kudos to them. Huge shout out to them. If you haven't checked them out, you need to do so, because we will be referring to those folks, and that's our job. We want to collaborate with you guys and other podcasters and YouTubers and stuff. So we've reached out to a few different people.
Yeah, the whole it's all about the community. Mm-hmm. This is the Song of Ice and Fire community, and that's everybody. Somebody says something, brings up a theory. It's like, wow, I don't know, you never thought about that, and then it changes everything.
Yeah, and I've heard people say that most of the theories that can be made are out there.
I don't think so.
I've got one that we are working on,
and I have one as well that we're working on.
And there's holes in it. There's a lot of holes in my theory, but I think when we talked about earlier today, the fact that we could be lied to by these maesters, that we have unreliable narrators, records aren't as clear as we might think, and
I mean, even if you look at the show, when Sam is saying, "Hey guys, I've seen them, like seen the others," and they're like, "Yeah, I don't think so."
Right.
So even the show picks up on that.
How many people know from the show, right? Based on the show, how many people in Westeros actually know that Rhaegar had his marriage annulled?
Like 3, like
But I mean, yeah, that's after Sam finds it out. Mm-hmm. Who knew before Sam found it out?
Well, somebody, because he wrote it down.
They wrote it down. It was a secret, so you had a maester who knew it, and this happened in secret however many years ago. Did anybody else know? I will say that the Dornish did not like the treatment of Elia Martell by Rhaegar.
Yeah.
So they weren't quick to join. He had Dornishmen, they say, at the Trident, but they weren't quick to join his cause, and very little fighting happened in Dorne because of that.
Arthur Dane know?
I don't know. Maybe he does.
There's
that whole piece. There's these Mance.
That's some theories we're going to be diving into. There's a lot about Arthur Dane.
Yeah, there sure is.
We're beginning to.
Why not? I don't even know if it's more. It's two things. There's a lot about Arthur Dane, and there's a hell of a lot about Mance Rayder.
Yeah.
And so whether you call them one and the same or two separate characters, it doesn't matter. They're both mentioned here in these early on books.
Yeah.
And they're significant.
And I'll give these guys another plug. Something that I never caught, but go watch the scene. Now, obviously, in the books, it's way different.
Yeah.
Because it's not Mance Rayder who dies. But go watch the scene where Mance Rayder's being burned, and he says, "I wish you good fortune in the wars to come."
Yeah.
And then the only other person who says that is Arthur Dayne before he fights Ned Stark, saying, "I wish you good fortune in the wars to come."
It's something, isn't it? It gives me chills just kind of thinking about it.
And why would my thing is that why would you say that
to Ned Stark?
Why would you for when someone shows up that you're supposed to be protecting and slay whoever else is there?
Oh, that was the only one.
Why would you say that? If your idea is I'm going to kill these people,
let me tell you.
Because hold on, just because think about this real quick. This is what we're calling this is the rabbit hole segment.
That's fine
of the show. But think about this: when the Viper is fighting the Mountain, and the Viper wants something from the Mountain, he says, "Do you know why you're like? Do you know who I am?" And the Mountain says, "Some dead man," because that's all he cares about. That's what's in front of him. So if Arthur Dayne's goal is to kill anyone who comes up to that tower to protect it, then why would he say, "I wish you good fortune in the wars to come"?
You want me to tell you? I got my hand raised. Because he says that to Eddard Stark. Because he was told to say to Sir Eddard that he wished him good fortune in the wars to come because there was only one man he would not kill.
It's possible.
There's only one man. He was going to kill every single one of those other men. And he might have died in the process.
Yeah.
But all of those Kingsguard knew that Ned is the only one who's allowed to go up to that tower. None of the other members could know the secret. He could know the secret, and he was the only one that was trusted with it.
Yeah.
I just kind of think that, and I think that's why he would say that, to say, he was going to disarm. I mean, the rest of them are dead. Yeah. But Ned, I do wish you good fortune in the wars to come. You'll survive this conflict. Yeah. And I might not make it, and so I want to say that before we start.
Well, in the fight itself, now again, they could just be making it Hollywood look. Let's have it look cool looking fight, but in the fight itself, when you watch it, it looks almost as if if Arthur Dayne
wanted to kill Ned
Stark, he would have.
He would have, and he didn't.
He didn't.
No. He was going to disarm him. I mean, he needed to. He was a skilled swordsman, and he can't.
Arthur Dayne's probably. Arthur Dayne's probably the second best swordsman that we've ever heard of. I would say Barristan Selmy's probably in his prime could beat Arthur Dayne. I mean, think about
that would be a match to behold.
I mean, think about this for a second, right?
Yeah.
Think about how good Duncan the Tall is.
Yeah.
And then Sir Barristan Selmy beats him when he's like 16.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then Barristan Selmy says, when Joffrey kicks him out, he says, "Even now," and he's like 90 years old.
Yeah.
"I could cut through all of you."
Yeah.
Like butter. No question.
Yeah.
You're talking about a 90-year-old guy or whatever. He's really old.
He's old. Yeah.
He's old. Whatever.
Yeah.
Slaying 5 other Kingsguard who are supposed to be the best.
And he would have.
Just no question.
And I believe him.
Oh, I do too.
Because you don't say that in front of the king and his court.
Yeah.
Right there with all these people around, unless you actually can follow through.
And it's possible that Arthur Dayne may be even better than that.
I know.
So there's no way that Ned Stark, who's 16,
there's no way.
There's just no way that.
Yeah, and so literally he would have been spared. He would have been taken up to the Tower of Joy, and they would have been, "This is the secret, and here's what we do." And to be honest with you, the show did it differently, but the book may actually do it that very way.
It may.
And the story is that I defeated Sir Arthur Dayne, killed him, took his sword. Did he take his body back, or just his sword?
Just the sword. Because supposedly, so this is a big thing. Supposedly they tear the Tower of Joy down and and bury them.
Yeah.
Using its things, using horses.
Exactly.
Just pull down a tower.
So all those guys end up where, at the wall or beyond. Okay. Yeah. I mean, just it's something. We need to stop because we'll get into more of it later. Yeah. But it is.
It's a huge theory we're working on.
Yeah, it's that, and that's that's one. We've got another one concerning Targaryens that we are going to be bringing forward soon. So we'll be back on that. All right, guys. So send us a raven at BTK Cast. We have one that we are tabling for next week. We thought we were closer to the Dany chapter. We have to get to Jon, and at the end of chapter Jon, we will read Maester Jaime of the White Owls. Raven. She also wrote she and Lady Cat of the Woodland Realm both sends us a raven concerning Dany and her chapter to come. Yep.
But I will say real quick.
Yes.
They kind of this so not I don't want to save it for what they say, but a big thing they talk about is the difference between the books and the show.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of truth to it, what they say.
Oh, for sure. It's good.
And
it's
it kind
actually
of goes back to what Sir Ezra was just ranting about.
It's a good raven. It is.
Yeah.
It's a good raven, and it's something we can't wait to show. I was hoping I could share it this week, but Dany's chapter happens in 2 weeks, so
right. We thought it was.
Yeah, we'll get it this next Sunday, and probably go on a nice big rabbit hole adventure with this as well. Yeah. So that'll be fun. So. All right, guys, time to man the wall. Our invite to our Patreon.com. We have some stuff. I'm going to be working on it. Well, let's see. Today will be Monday for you guys. We record these on Sunday. So these should be posted this week, some more Patreon material. We've got a little update, a little, what do we call this?
Calling the banners.
Yeah, calling the banners. It's basically just a little update, business update, sort of a Patreon update with Matt and I. And it's just kind of.
I believe, a food review coming soon.
Yep, we've got that, and
our first HBO show comparison.
Right, we got that coming as well, and I'm working on a Black Council episode 1 because it's just so much of the histories are happening. We've got to get them in before Fire and Blood.
Yeah,
hits the fan. So, all right. So check us out there at Patreon / Bend the Knee. We actually are ordering shirts. What is today? Today's April 29th. So tomorrow.
This week?
Yeah, this week, Tuesday, I think. We're going to order shirts for everybody who is signed up on Patreon there. So, if you guys want to sign up, head on over there. We would love to see people, join the community. Get your sigil made. Get your name and your house words. We'll refer to those here on the show. We always have the doc pulled up too, where we have our community. So, like as I go to mention someone's name, I pull up their actual Westerosi name, and
or
Essos.
It's
fun. Or Essos, yeah, whatever you want, So definitely check that out, guys. It's a lot of fun, and we're trying to make it something neat. And we are raising the rigor of content on our Patreon, just so you know. When the Black Council hits, it's not going to be just like a formal, it's just Matt and Ez kind of, shooting the shit. No. There's going to be some deep, sweaty stuff there. And it's literally, it's more of our, we will have done a crap ton of research. And so we're going to record us researching that and diving into some of these deeper histories and the mysteries of the tourney at Harrenhal. So, all
right, guys. Well, as always, we want to thank you for playing the Game of Thrones. In our next episode, we will be discussing Chapter 10, Jon.
Yes. So, if you like our podcast, don't forget to subscribe, like us, write a review, or leave a comment. You can send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com.
We'll see you in a week, and remember that winter is coming.